So we want to know whether the ideas discussed in Simone de Beauvoir's feminist works are also discussed in Nier Automata. Has Nier Automata read Simone de Beauvoir? And I want to be as just and balanced and fair as I can in this analysis, because sure, on the one hand, it would be only too easy with this game that's full to bursting with sexy ninja maids to just call it sexist and problematic and misogynistic.
Section 1. Woman?
Simone Lucie Ernestine Marie Bertrand de Beauvoir was born in 1908. She was a French philosopher, although she didn't consider herself a philosopher. It's okay, Simone. I tell people I'm not a gamer. Do they listen?
In 1929, existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre became de Beauvoir's partner, and the two influenced one another's existentialist philosophy. For the next 50 years, they were in a committed but open relationship.
Although before you come to claim them as positive polyamorous role models, let me let you know that they were involved with two teenage sisters, one of whom de Beauvoir taught in secondary school. And let me also say, ew! Let's talk about some of her works instead, shall we?
De Beauvoir was the first person to articulate the difference between biological sex and socially constructed gender. She also explored the definition of women in reaction to the definition of men, which was, funnily enough, why she called her book on the topic The Second Sex. This, as has been examined repeatedly, is a Hegelian understanding of gender. Women, the other, is defined so that men can be defined, in the same way that the slave in Hegel's master-slave dialectic is defined as other, so the master can be recognized as the master. She also explored the moral and ethical implications of existentialism, specifically the existentialist work of Sartre. See, at first, de Beauvoir claimed it would be impossible to base a moral and ethical system of Sartre's being and nothingness, and then she just went and did it. Which is, if nothing else, an incredible hype strat. In The Ethics of Ambiguity, she constructed piece by piece an understanding of morality and ethics in a world where not only humans have no inherent meaning and purpose, but every human is both subject for themselves and object for others, given freedom by their own self-consciousness or self-awareness, but given limits by their position as an object.
All that to say, there is more to Simone de Beauvoir's work than just The Second Sex, even if that is considered to be her big work. So, in terms of confronting sexism and the divisions between genders, it's actually a little sexist in and of itself that Simone is just the woman character who's a woman, and all her ideas are about womaning and women. Although, arguably, this is because each instance of a philosopher referenced in the game isn't actually about their ideas specifically, but a nod to a school of thought that they represent.
Simone de Beauvoir may be seminal, but she's also a slightly outdated feminist reference. In the same way that referencing Marx and Engels gives a nod to awareness of class consciousness, but ultimately Marx's theories are about 200 years out of date at this point, referencing de Beauvoir is used as a nod to feminism in general, even though Simone de Beauvoir did other philosophical work than just feminist theory, and The Second Sex is 70 years old this year. I mean, the first chapter opens with the words, "Woman? Very simple, say those who like simple answers. She is a womb, an ovary, parts of which, some people may, find to be outdated now." Although, she does say that's for people who like simple answers, so Simone, the robot, not the French woman, is the most hyper-feminine character in Nier Automata. Everything about her is about performing femininity to the max. She sings from atop a stage 20 feet tall and deadly, wearing an elaborate metal ball gown, decorated with the corpses of androids she has slain.
And honestly, goals.
The first time you meet Simone in Nier Automata, she isn't named, she's just another boss you have to defeat. But on the second playthrough as 9S, the hacker, you get a literal peek inside her world. It turns out she was wildly in love with Jean-Paul, the robot, not the French guy. Simone made herself more and more elaborately feminine in order to try to attract the affections of Jean-Paul, but Jean-Paul, eternally wrapped up in his own thoughts, pondering the nature of existence, barely noticed her. I don't think it's fair to call this a reversal of the real-world relationship between Jean-Paul and Simone, as much as it's accurate to say it has nothing the fuck to do. Like, you could say maybe Jean-Paul, the French guy, not the robot, was more jealous and in real life the pursuer rather than the one being pursued, but I don't think we can really know that that's true, especially as the story of these two people in a non-monogamous relationship has been retold by so many monogamous people. I think it's easy to see where the trope of the jealous, possessive man could have crept in.
To some degree, it seems like Nier Automata trends towards making ironic tragedies for all its philosophers. Kant the Forest King gets transformed into Emmanuel, the tiny baby. Kierkegaard is the headless head of a suicide cult. Hegel is some balls. Okay.
So perhaps the cases of Jean-Paul and Simone, the robots not the French philosophers, have more to do with constructing these ironic tragedies than reflecting the real people and their actual relationships at all. Jean-Paul, the robot not the French guy, is chronically wrapped up in his own bullshit so much that he barely notices the world around him. His arc ends with him disappearing to go seek the truth of the world. Simone's ironic tragedy has to do with her love for Jean-Paul, but it really has nothing to do with him. He is the object of her desires in exactly the same sense that she talked about in The Ethics of Ambiguity. It could be anyone in her story. The point of her story is that she fell in love with someone and is trying to be as feminine as possible to attract them. If the game were really trying to reference philosophers' actual ideas by naming characters after them, rather than just using them as a reference to a school of thought they belong to, it might have named this character after Judith Butler instead. Judith Butler outlined the theory of gender performativity, the idea that gender is performed. This is commonly misconstrued as gender is only a performance, which is of course upsetting to trans people, because it would suggest that when they aren't performing their gender correctly, they aren't their gender. However, that's patently absurd. No one would hold cis people to a standard and say that, for example, a cis man stops being a man when he isn't growing a thick, impressive beard or talking over women in meetings. So although gender can be performed, there is more to gender than meets the eye. Literally.
If you're an angry TERF thinking that this is just utter degeneracy, well, I honestly couldn't care any less about what you think.
Inarguably, Simone's character is all about the performance of femininity. I mean, she's in a theatre, on a stage. The problem with how Nier Automata represents this idea of performed gender is that Nier Automata's central philosophy is you can find meaning in a meaningless universe, but it has to be better than us versus them, which in the case of gendered differences translates to more or less gender is fake? Now, I'm not going to argue with gender as fake exactly, but the game frames this message through the lens of femininity, and still makes masculinity default. Even the sexy shirtless machine men, Adam and Eve, for the amount they are arguably objectified or sexualized, they aren't presented as engaging in an excessive and frivolous display of gender.
Simone, on the other hand, is the subject of a kind of obvious question. Why does she dress like that? She's a robot. Her gender performance is under scrutiny, even as the game tries to tell us that gender is fake, in a way that the male character's gender performance is not. Ultimately, this reinforces a stereotype that women are somehow less serious, and that femininity is a pointless extravagance reliant on luxury. But of course, this doesn't just revolve around Simone. This has to do with all the women in Nier Automata.
Section 2. The women in Nier Automata.
Our old pal Simone is one of 4 feminine-presenting machines in the game. There are other machines that identify as female, but the followers of Jean-Paul are the machine with makeup, the machine in love, and the machine with a dream.
Although they are in different locations, at different relative distances from Jean-Paul and also to Simone, they are not entirely in a physical straight line from one to the other. The middle iteration, the machine in love, is way out in the desert. But the machine in makeup is in the same location as Jean-Paul, and the machine with a dream is in the same location as Simone. Instead of being necessarily on a straight line to Simone, they are on a metaphorical path towards her. Machine with makeup has begun to perform gender in a basic way. Machine in love is performing her gender not just with makeup but also with clothing and other decorations, although she still retains the default machine form. Machine with a dream has upgraded her form beyond the basic one to perform femininity better. To me though, the most interesting thing is the names. Although none of them have names like people, the progression of the names of these machines is really interesting. At first, a totally literalistic name, machine with makeup. Then a name indicating an internal life and feelings, machine in love. We can infer that the machine in love is in love with Jean-Paul, although this isn't definitely the love that defines her character. Machine with a dream may be dreaming about being with Jean-Paul, but maybe not. This name is the most ambiguous and allows us the most room for us to imagine what it means. What is her dream? It could be anything. The problem with these machine women, exactly as with Simone, is that their femininity is being constructed, but that construction is being pointed out, which highlights it as fake, frivolous, pointless expression of gender, whereas the male machines are undecorated, default-shaped machines. The game undercuts itself because although it's going for gender is fake, it winds up at masculinity is normal, femininity is fake. The male machines don't perform their gender at all, unless Jean-Paul's hat is his masculinity? Wow, I completely forgot to talk about this, so I'm just recording this with no script right now, but I did not mention that there is a bit where a bunch of blue machines who are Romeos and red machines who are Juliets first start to perform famous parts of the play and then just fucking annihilate each other. And yeah, that's I think that speaks for itself, really. The androids, for the most part, don't have the same problem, because while the machines are building from the bottom upwards trying to learn to imitate humanity, the androids were made in humanity's image. The Yorha androids come in two kinds, adult woman and young boy, or more accurately, ninja maid and hackatine. There are adult men among the resistance androids down on Earth, but among the androids from the space station, 2B and 9S seem to be a pretty representative sample.
2B herself is quite well written, even when she isn't in the story. In another story, a woman who was murdered at the start kicking off a revenge murder rampage would be the woman in the refrigerator, but 2B is the heart of the story, the main character. I'm not going to rant on and on about the design of 2B and the other Yorha androids forever. I think it's enough to say that they're clearly designed to be sexually inviting.
2B is placed in a position where you have a certain relationship to her. You think that you are acting as her, since you control her in the story, but a part of you still exists separate to her as the observer, as the voyeur, and that's where the parasocial element creeps in. Parasocial relationships, recently the hot topic of many YouTube video essays, is the academic term for one-sided relationships where someone feels like they have a real relationship with someone they don't necessarily have a social relationship with. Relative to our discussion of Nier Automata, it's also very possible to design something to encourage that relationship. For example, I don't know, if a website sent you a push notification to congratulate you every time that a content creator thought your comment on their content was good. Some of these people I have real social relationships with, but all of them are creators whose content I've watched. So to some degree I also have parasocial relationships to the idea of those people, and at least in the case of Lily, my biggest fan, some of those people have parasocial relationships to the idea of me.
Parasocial relationships aren't inherently good or bad, they're just what happens when there's some sort of character or persona that seemingly interacts with you, the audience. You feel like you know them even though you don't. And that's why, even if you do have an actual social relationship to some sort of public persona, there's a separate element, a parasocial relationship to the character that they play.
So, going back to Nier Automata, we can see that this character, 2B, is someone we're developing a parasocial relationship with. We push button and she do thing, and when she do thing, she's sexy. So there's a parasocial attraction to this character. You might even say, hey, I find this gratuitous, I don't want to look at her butt all the time. But the game deliberately autocorrects the third-person camera as you run to a low angle trailing behind her. There is, I think, a fairly solid case that the design of the game is trying to elicit that parasocial attraction. When asked about the design of the Yorha androids, Yoko Taro, ever the enigmatic and facetious dickhead, replied, "I just really like girls." In that design talk where he looked at backwards scriptwriting and photo thinking, his example was that the audience is sad because a girl dies. It's almost absurdly tokenistic and objectifying. The girl, young, innocent, loved, is just a tool to make the audience sad.
That is a degree of objectification that feels like it can only be self-aware, right? Oh god. However, the strongest piece of evidence that the game is trying to build up that parasocial attraction doesn't actually relate to 2B or any of the feminine androids. It has to do with the male protagonist of Nier Automata.
Section 3. 9S is a worthless piss boy. In Michael Saba's essay, Saba says that there was a particular thing in the game that made him sit up and take notice. When he was fighting Simone, she was demanding that people look at her, insisting she must be beautiful. The game wouldn't let the player move the camera, denying Simone the attention that she demanded. The thing is, the part of the game that made him sit up and take notice is also what made me sit up and take notice. Michael says in that essay that other analysis of this game misses the mark, but I haven't really seen any analysis of Nier Automata that really looks at gender. And that's weird to me, because playing through one loop as 2B and then another loop as 9S has a pretty clear meta-narrative, in my opinion, to do with gender and the sexuality of a presumed straight male audience. At first, you're positioned one step removed from 2B, although common sense would tell you you're actually no steps removed. For all intents and purposes, you think you simply are her. As I said before, you press button, she do thing. Because you don't realize you are one step removed from her, you aren't aware that you're developing that parasocial attraction. When you play again as 9S, you're an extra step removed from 2B. Now, seeing her through 9S, you can maybe see that you are being shown 9S's relationship to her, and realizing that his unrequited attraction is your unrequited attraction. Your parasocial attraction to this character on a screen may as well be his attraction to this real woman who treats him coldly and brushes off any attempts at friendliness. Any relationship they have is clearly in his head with a character of her, not the real person she is. I think there's a reason that 2B and 9S are a grown woman in an absurd Ninja Maid outfit and an adolescent boy. 9S isn't a fully grown man, so there's a certain automatic harmlessness about him. Essentially, he has the mind and personality of an adult, but the body of a child, making any possible relationship between them absurd. Why should 2B be interested at all by this boy? Therefore, he becomes the perfect emblem of both male entitlement and impotence. A2, the third protagonist of the game, is a bad bitch, by which I mean she kicks ass and she totally fucking owns. Her character is less well developed than that of 2B, maybe because she comes in as a secondary character, introduced first as an antagonist. A2 is also seemingly less developed than 2B, because in some sense she is 2B. That is, she's an older Yorha battle unit that 2B is physically modelled after, and once 2B is dead, A2 is there to continue 2B's story. 2B is revealed in the late game to be a unit sent to kill 9S whenever he discovers the truth that the war is pointless, humanity is dead, and the androids and machines are the same, so that Yorha's eternal war can continue. She's done this potentially countless times, and 9S has had his memories wiped and been sent back to continue his service. So, what I mean by A2 exists to continue 2B's story is not that A2 is trying to carry out 2B's mission in the narrative, but that she takes 2B's place in the narrative. The reveal of this information by A2 to 9S serves as a final nail in the coffin of their relationship. Dude, she never could have been into you. 2B is the main character. The story is about her, the real game, but doesn't feature her for the most part. She is the main character and you feel that since you play as her first. It does a huge amount to other 9S's story by making 2B that main character, which gives you room to see 9S's actions from a different angle. When Adam has 9S held hostage, he taunts and manipulates him, saying at one point, "You're thinking about how much you want 2B, aren't you?" Which, as has been pointed out, is a 4-letter word that has been censored out. And it could be fuck, but it could also be kill. But it's probably fuck. 2B has become the target of 9S's hatred as much as the machines are, and it all manifests around A2. Playing as A2 gives you the third perspective. First, seeing 2B as an invisible eyeball, a non-corporeal spectator, then seeing her through 9S's eyes, and therefore seeing 9S's attraction to her as a parallel to our own. Then, with 2B made unavailable to him, we see from the outside a conflict between 9S and a woman near identical to the woman he was pursuing, A2. Looking at the story through a squint, focusing less on the details of 2B's convoluted mission or the Yorha War, and just the general shapes of these character interactions, there's a story here about 9S pursuing 2B, her rejecting his advances, and him flying into a fury filled with impotent rage while at the same time seriously, murderously angry. His rage is impotent because it cannot get him what he wants, but he still poses a threat to her, and by her, I mean the woman who killed the woman he was interested in, A2. This impressionist, squinting view of the story crystallizes in this moment. where 9S gruesomely stabs an illusion of 2B over and over and over. He's no longer mourning the loss of his beloved, he just wants revenge on the machines, on the world, on women. From 9S's perspective, 2B, the sexy and lovable woman he knows, who to some degree falls into the born sexy yesterday trope, is replaced by someone who looks just like her, but is older, with a complete backstory and internal life, and he sees as his enemy. She has taken 2B away from him. Like, dude, we get it. You hate women.
I'm not saying this is what Nier Automata is about, but I would call this theme undeniable. A core interaction of the characters in this story is an exploration of straight male sexuality and what happens when women don't reciprocate men's affection.
Nonetheless, the 9S as audience insert theme of the second playthrough, shaming the straight male sexuality, does something unintentionally that hurts the feminist stance of the game. That is often the problem with feminism written by and for straight men. It's usually much more focused around how guilty men should feel for how they treat women than anything else. And that means that first, they have to represent how men treat women, which usually means first have to just replicate a lot of the things they're trying to criticize. It's like if I wanted to get really into the problem of anti-Semitism as a way of displacing anti-capitalist criticism. So I made a video called The Real Problem with Zuckerberg, and I picked out a picture for the thumbnail where Mark Zuckerberg looked sufficiently like an anti-Semitic stereotype. Or maybe I edit him to have creepy lizard eyes, or both. And then in the video I explained that no, it's nothing to do with him being Jewish, it's really just a point about capitalism. If I did that, I still would have spent a bunch of time creating an aesthetic for the video that was functionally indistinguishable from regular-degular anti-Semitism. The problem is that plenty of people play Nier Automata in a way that's analogous to just seeing the title and thumbnail of the video and not actually watching it. So yes, in some ways, the answer to the question, why did you design the androids to be sexy ninja maids, Yoko Taro, is, in fact, I just really like girls. Section 4. A few different interpretations.
As I said at the start, the second sex is 70 years old this year. There isn't much in it that's exactly outdated or outright wrong, but there has been a lot of feminist thought since then, and the nature of the patriarchy that de Beauvoir was writing about has changed a fair bit. For example, not just women, but increasingly people of all genders are expected to look as beautiful as possible.
Gonna moisturize, gonna look cute, everyone's gonna say I'm cute, and if they don't think I'm cute, then they'll stop giving me money, and I'll lose the house!
Choosing to be sexy is seen by some to be more empowering now, as opposed to the original analyses of the limiting nature of sexual objectification. Which means that the horny discourse, the unending tidal wave of fanboy boners, is good? Oh no!
The game itself seemingly uses much more modern ideas of gender in its philosophical examination of it. After all, have you seen Simone and her feminine dragon of chaos? Yes, under her skirt, Simone has a big, semi-phallic dragon monster. I feel that once again, this is a use of the game's Ship of Theseus theme, combined with some of those ideas of gender performatism. Simone has a dragon down there, but you still identify her as a woman. So, in a sense, Yoko Taro says trans rights, I guess? In all seriousness, there are queer characters in the game.
2B here. What's wrong?
Oh. There's this operator I kind of liked, but when I asked her out, she turned me down.
So Nier Automata's philosophy of breaking down the constructed identities and looking past differences has been applied there. The androids don't care about being gay or straight. Why would they?
My point in pointing out that the second sex is in some ways outdated is that to some degree the investigation of whether Nier Automata has read Simone de Beauvoir is made irrelevant by the fact that the game is using her as a nod towards feminism in general rather than her specific work.
Moreover, my point is that there is an interpretation in which we can understand Nier Automata to be using a very up-to-date, very sophisticated understanding of gender. And yes, it does all center around Simone's dragon dick. There is another interpretation we can make in which Nier Automata's feminism is less well thought through, in which case the game recreates a lot of potentially unhelpful tropes in order to criticize them. Inarguably, the way the game delivers these ideas is really complex and rich, but in this interpretation, the feminist theory of the game is less sophisticated. And there is technically another interpretation in which Yoko Taro really didn't intend to communicate any feminist ideas at all, one in which he really does just really like girls. It's not this one. Yoko Taro has stated again and again that he doesn't want people guessing at his intentions, that he wants his games to stand for themselves. So it's up to us to judge which of these interpretations we like. Of these interpretations, for me, it's pretty clear that the one I prefer is the first one. John Source, a non-binary person writing about playing Nier Automata and coming to terms with their gender identity, wrote, "The first time I played, I hit the delete file button without even thinking. Visiting this world again at the end of the year, with the weight of these past few months on me, the choice isn't so simple. I find myself sitting down to my computer again and again to visit that screaming thing in the basement of the amusement park. She does not want me there. I wish I could find a way to save her. For as long as I leave my save file intact, she is still locked away in that basement theater. I'm keeping her alive, breathing, screaming. Beautiful, she cries, for the 100th time. Beautiful. I must become beautiful. If only."
That first interpretation of Nier Automata, in which we give it the benefit of the doubt, and we read those feminist ideas in it that break down the gender binary, it seems the most useful to me, the most meaningful. Beyond use and meaning, though, there's still something more about it. In terms of how we relate to the piece, this way seems better to me. In terms of how we experience the game, this interpretation only makes it more powerful, more rich, more haunting.
I'd like to thank Baphometrics and Han the Man for making fantastic music for this channel. This current track, one of the 3 Baffy made for these Nier Automata videos, is so good I feel a little bad putting this outro over it. I'd also like to thank you, the viewer, for watching all the way to the end, and my patrons, who make it so I can just about pay rent and usually eat food. Mostly. If you'd like to help me mostly eat food, you can become a patron or donate to me directly via PayPal. I'm doing a thing from now on where I shout out smaller channels, and this time I want to draw your attention to my pals in Belgium, Cav P and Amelia Jane. Cav is doing a retrospective on Jim Carrey's 90s movies, and I'm as excited for each new episode of that as I am for new seasons of my favourite Netflix shows. And Amelia does fantastic content covering a variety of topics. They have a book called Feminazi, and they made a video about temp agencies that I really wasn't expecting to make me cry, but it did. Go subscribe to these lovely people, I promise it's worth your while. Thanks once more to everyone who offered any kind of support through this project. The last few months have been pretty rough, and while money continues to be tight, it really helps me get up and get on with these essays to know I have friends out there who've got my back. See you all soon for my Pride Month essay. Bye for now.